Welcome to News and Views. I'm Danae Jones and it's my pleasure to bring you this week's segment. Today we're at Complete Business Solutions in Cairns, where a new purpose-built iiHub facility is located in McLeod Street. The iiHub has been created for Cairns startups and small business owners to provide them with a low-cost access to co-working space, meeting rooms, mentoring, technology, professional services and workshops. Today we're talking to Nick Trompf, CEO of Advance Cairns. After 30 years with News Limited, including 14 of those years here in Cairns, he is now at the helm of the Regional Advocacy and Economic Development Group Advance Cairns and is about to lead the biggest ever business delegation from TNQ to Canberra to promote the key growth opportunities for our area in the lead up to the federal election. Welcome to News and Views, Nick.
Hi Danae, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Now, obviously you haven't been in Advance Cairns CEO chair for that long. It's been, how long has it been?
7, 8 months.
So it has been a fair while. But obviously before you arrived there was a lot of controversy and that was very well played out in the media, which I'm sure you're well aware of. How have you settled into the role after all of that?
Yeah, well the controversy you talk about, I guess, created the opportunity for me to join Advance Cairns because I'd left News in July of last year by my own choice because they had asked me to move to Brisbane for another opportunity, but we love this part of the world. It's home for us for good, so we just didn't want to move again. So I left and was spending my time enjoying the farm and reading the Cairns Post with interest with some of the shenanigans that were going on.
Not actually managing it.
Not part of it. So, but of course, the CEO chair became vacant off the back of that, and I received a phone call, and I went through a pretty intensive interview process. I did psych testing and all sorts of stuff. So even though I'd been on the board twice before, it was not a
So they
given.
psych tested you. So
yeah.
we know that you're all right in the head then.
Yeah, my wife says different things sometimes. But so, I ended up getting through the process, which was a really thorough process. I take my hat off to the way they did the process, and I landed the job. So I started mid-January, and in what is a really new field and an interesting role for me. But in the end, I have a lot of passion to promote the region. So in some ways, the role was kind of tailor-made, albeit it's very different running a small advocacy agency compared to my last job. I had 1,500 staff and 13 general managers around Australia, so it's quite a contrast. But I'm settling in, and there's plenty to do. Probably not the easiest backdrop to start in, as you alluded to, but it is what it is. I can only control what happens in the future. I can't influence what's happened in the past.
And so although it's a new role for you, you're not new to business. I mean, you've been running your own farms for many years and running the newspapers for a lot of years. What is, from a business perspective, some of the things that you'd like to bring to the role there at Advance Cairns? I
think one of the opportunities for us as a region is we've got several major sectors that probably operate quite independently of each other. And we're really an export region, an export city, and the pillars of that economy, tourism clearly, agriculture very much so, education, resources, to name 4 core pillars that generate a lot of the wealth in the region. Those pillars tend to operate largely independent of each other. There isn't the overlap or cross-pollination that there could be with them. And that's part of the reason why Advance Cairns was first created in the first place. Now I'm lucky enough that in my last role, working in media, I dealt with all sorts of business people across all sorts of sectors. So I know people from tourism, and I know people from education, and I know people from agriculture, a bit less so from resources. So I had reasonable knowledge of those industries as well, and some of the players in the industry. So hopefully over time I built relationships and earned some respect from some of those people, and hopefully that means that as we at Advance Cairns and myself personally work to try to get better coordination across those sectors, some of my past will be useful in helping to bring together some of those streams, because they're very interrelated. If you think about the planes that are flying in and out from overseas at the moment, one of the critical things we need to do to assure them up, particularly the Chinese flights, is to get the bellies of those planes full of agricultural produce or aquacultural produce. Much like Cathay Pacific is full of coral trout when it flies out every day to Hong Kong. So providing some linkages between the tourism sector in the inbound space with passengers and the agricultural sector in hopefully the outbound space, you can see that's a really clear example of where if the industries work better together, agriculture can help sustain tourism and tourism can help sustain agriculture by opening up new export markets. So it's that type of collaboration work that I think is where we can add the most value, and hopefully I can add a bit along the way myself.
And I think you're not alone when you say that. I know Bill Cummings from Cummings Economics, very highly respected in our community, has been saying for a long, long time that agriculture has somewhat been forgotten in a lot of respects, yet it has always driven our economy here.
Yeah, and I grew up on farms, so I'm pretty passionate about it. I've got a small cattle herd and still do that, as I said before myself. It's agriculture right across Australia is probably seen as a legacy or old-fashioned industry, and it's quite unfair. It's actually really innovative, and we're seeing before our very eyes right now a rapid change in agricultural production, particularly on the Atherton tablelands. Yep. Some of those soils there are the most fertile in Australia. Good soils, good water, as long as we get a wet season, but for the most part, very safe rainfall. And we've seen a huge change in the last 3 or 4 years in the type of production on the tablelands. The explosion in avocados, blueberries, wasn't there been one grown on the tablelands 5 years ago. We've now got the Costa Group, Australia's biggest fruit and vegetable grower, publicly listed entity, pumping millions and millions of dollars into growing blueberries on the Atherton tableland. And they bought 5 avocado farms last year.
Wow.
They're looking to expand even further. So there's big money from big corporate and private players coming into agriculture. So we're starting to see, I think, the dawn of a new age for agriculture here. That won't all be in the belly of aeroplanes, by the way. A lot of that will go through most of it goes through the road systems down to markets in Brisbane and Melbourne and so on. But that's part of the frustration for the industry here too, is that you'll often hear people say that produce off farms will go down south and then come back up here.
Yeah.
Which seems absurd, but it's just the way the supply chain is sort of set up. So yeah, I think as you rightly pointed out, Bill's spot on that as it stands right now, agriculture is significant, and it can get a whole lot better if we can open up more land and provide more water, which is one of the main, in the agriculture space, one of the main initiatives Advance Cairns is driving for is to get a new dam on the Atherton tablelands called Malinga Dam. So we've been front and centre in driving that with government at state and federal level. And it's getting new dams built is not easy. The last one built up here was 1958, which is Lake Tinaroo. Yep. So they don't happen terribly often, and Labor governments are not particularly enamoured to building new dams either. They have the environmental people tend to rail against it a little bit. Yep. But if we are successful as a region, and it's not just us, all the people pushing for it, that has the potential to open up a lot more land for high value agricultural production, to add more economic input. So agriculture is one of the big drivers. And if you look at where we sit geographically and in the economic cycle, if you like, with the emerging middle class in Asia, we're really well placed here to capitalise on the tourism growth and the agricultural growth and the education growth that should come as the middle class gets bigger and bigger. So it's pretty exciting. Even the economy here is still so-so. The potential for those 3 pillars in particular, and even resources, which is recovering now, is really, really strong.
It's interesting that you mentioned Malinga Dam, because that's just one of the key pillars and areas of growth that I know Advance Cairns is driving for and advocating for with the TNQ Convoy. Now, can you tell us a bit about that? I know that you've been really proactive in making sure that Advance Cairns, Cairns Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Tropical North Queensland are collaborating on this and heading down to Canberra to beat down those doors and basically have a voice for the region. What is your main aim with that?
Well, the timing's no accident. We've got a federal election happening, has to be before May next year.
Could be before then?
Well, with the recent shenanigans in Parliament House, I think it's highly likely it will be. And there's a great propensity that it could be before Christmas. So, as you know, we're planning to take 50 to 60 business and industry people down to Canberra for a couple of days for a succession of meetings with people from the Prime Minister down. Obviously that's fluid at the moment in terms of those meetings, because the whole environment in Canberra is pretty fluid. But our plan is to show a united face, represent all of the industries. So it's a regional mission. It's not an Advance Cairns delegation. There's quite a number of people going on it that are not members of our organisation, but they're going because they should be there, because they're involved with significant industries up here that are a key part of the economic structure. So we hope to go down there and intend to go down there in force as a group under the one banner. We're going to wear a nice orange tie or an orange scarf, depending on who we are, so there's, you know, a little bit of sense of symbolism, if you like. So for a couple of days,
the team from TNQ.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, for a couple of days in Parliament House, everywhere you turn, the Orange Army, to quote the Taipan's language, will be everywhere. So,
be noticed, well and truly.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, that's a bit of theatre, but that's part of it. You know,
Absolutely.
that's part of it. You know, it's a high-profile advocacy initiative, so you've got to bring a bit of theatre to that, because Canberra can be pretty dreary and grey. They don't wear a lot of orange down there for a start.
A lot of black, a lot of grey, a lot of brown.
Yes, that's right. So that's really what we're about, you know, a couple of days working together. And when I took the idea to the Chamber and to TNQ, who we work with closely anyway, you know, they from day one, they were, yeah, what a great idea, let's do it.
Yep.
And similarly, we've reached out to the mayors to join us on the journey. By unfortunate quirk of timing, they've actually got a delegation in Brisbane, which Parliament's sitting in the same week, on the very same time.
Yep.
So it's just an unfortunate timing there that we actually can't go together. Because we're doing ours in October because there's a function that hosted by the Northern Australian Minister on that date. So our date's kind of locked and their date's kind of locked, so they won't be able to join us on the journey, but we certainly would love to have them there, and we'll be taking along with us some of their key priorities to promote the region, because we're here to promote the region. You know, the trip's not about Advance Cairns, it's about the region.
And I think regardless of the shenanigans that are going on down in Canberra, like you say, it's so important that the region does show a face down there, because there could very well be an election sooner rather than later. Yeah. And we all know that politicians think of the political cycle and saving their seats. So if the region can be down there when that time is
Absolutely.
nigh, hopefully our voice is heard.
Well, you look at the seat of Leichhardt, Warren's seat, and its margin is a touch under 4%. And I think the ALP feels that seat might be in play. So that's a positive for us, because that means the ALP is going to be really interested, and I know Warren is really interested in securing commitments out of his government. So it's a good context for us to be down there raising the profile of the issues we think that matter. And we've already got a commitment long before this conversation from Bill Shorten. One of the big problems we've got in Cairns is our road network, and our principal problem is lack of foresight years ago, and we're bounded by mountains and water. And so the practicalities of building a sexy ring road like Townsville's got, we've got a problem. And we can't build it on the water, and we can't build it on the mountain. So one of the things that Advance Cairns is advocating for is to extend our National Highway A1 from where it ends near the port of Cairns up to Smithfield, and hopefully beyond eventually. Now, if that happens, that unlocks a lot more federal funding. So that will allow us to start the planning to significantly upgrade Sheridan Street and Captain Cook Highway. So whilst we'll never get a ring road like Townsville has, because there isn't the land, we're going to have to improve that trunk artery, and similarly the Western Arterial around the back through Caravonica. We're going to have to improve those two arteries substantially, because you can imagine 50 years from now how big the city's going to be and how big the traffic's going to be and the population. And if we don't do something now, we're going to have a major problem. And it's a pity something wasn't done 30 years ago when they could have put a ring road around the city before some of the suburbs were built.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
We'd all be geniuses if we had that.
Yeah. Just one last thing before we go. Now, the teams that are going down there are focusing on some key elements and key areas.
Yes.
Can you just tell our viewers what they are?
Yeah, sure. There's 11 of those across a range. We've already talked about a few with education, agriculture, tourism, resources, construction, regional development, transport and roads, small and medium enterprises, energy, the reef. We've got one dedicated just to the reef, because the reef's a hot potato right now, and the reef's not just about tourism. The reef's about agriculture as well, in terms of there's a lot of money been invested in trying to reduce agricultural runoff into the reef. And the reef is really the heartbeat of our economy here in a lot of ways. It's the thing that gives us our global brand presence and attracts a lot of visitors to the region. So now there's some of the core sectors that'll be represented down there. So it's a broad cross section, teams of 3 to 5 people in each of those sectors, really well respected people from not just Cairns, from the region, you know, from Tablelands, Tully, to the north.
It's a huge delegation.
Yeah, a bit like boiling the ocean actually. Anyway, I'm sure it'll be right on the night, to use a television expression.
Yeah. Well, we wish you every success with
Thank
the
you.
delegation. We hope that you come back and share with us the update and how it goes down there, and hopefully we get some outcomes for our region.
Yeah, sure. I'm coming back, definitely.
Yeah,
So,
excellent.
We'll see.
Excellent.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Cheers, my pleasure.
So there you have it, folks. Nick Trompf, CEO of Advance Cairns, leading the biggest TNQ convoy down to Canberra very shortly in October. That's all we have for you this week. We'll see you next week.